نوتي خبيوة إديوم بتباقيوخ عم يقرأ دنس صورة شا ليما عاشورايا بصلايلي جو لستا قادنا قابيات تينا بتايا مقروة لقاني أخا هدامة من بني أمتن عاشورة الدخاينة قمديتة فيرفيلد مديتة سيدني قادنا قابيات تينا بتايا قامتوا محلايا ين كونسل إلكشن هل بتبهاوين البوقاري قام يقرأ دنس بلشانة إنجليسايا وبجو بلشانة إنجليسايا من سبب إتن رابة هدامة لنا هم زمان لشانة عاشورايا ين لشانة عربايا قد مبرملن بشرابة بدن قابياتي وقمودي لصلايا قدها لستا ومودي نخيالو تخمنياتي قدرن قبايتين بتايا.
Thank you, Albert, for having me here today.
Can you share a bit about your personal journey and how it has prepared you for a role in local government?
To answer that question, I don't think anyone can be prepared to go into local government. Everyone has their own history and they formulated their own perspectives upon their way of having their experience. I would say I'm prepared because I was born here. I grew up local. I wouldn't say I know, but I've touched many of the issues that are surrounding our community. I was born at Fairfield Hospital, went to Smithfield Public School for my primary education, then Fairfield High School. So my whole life has been shaped and formed around the narratives of Fairfield. I've only lived, seen and breathed Fairfield, for me to say. I've also, I'm a law student. I study law and political science at the University of New South Wales. So I understand the legal concepts that go behind it and the procedures. I'm also a volunteer at our local state emergency service, which is at Fairfield. We help a lot of constituents with if during flooding, trees falling down. So I think all of those would provide experience for me to enter the space, but I wouldn't say anyone is fully prepared to enter because you don't know what's fully expected. So I would say that these are my experiences and hopefully these can reflect the needs of our constituents.
What motivated you to run for local government?
Running into local government is a massive step. It's a big opportunity. I would say the peers around me, a lot of my teachers, my fellow mates, people that see me through organizational spaces. But more importantly, it was offered through Dai Li, which I was in her Fowler Youth Advisory Committee at that time. She knew I had a lot of interest in going into government, so then she offered me to be on her ticket. But a lot of people saw how passionate I am for our Australian community, specifically in Fairfield, and how much I advocate on behalf of it. And at a young age, my teachers saw me advocating in high school when I was in SRC, where I was school vice captain, and they wanted me to enter these spaces at a young age and learn more about it. So I would say more of my peers helped me and encouraged me to go into local government. But local government, it resonates a lot with our community because it's all local. You're not focusing on state or federal issues or other communities. It's all centered here. So you can see the changes that you're making. So that's another reason why I actually wanted to run for local government is I want to see the changes that I'll be able to make if elected. But it's a journey that I'm willing to take and learn as I go throughout the whole process.
What unique perspectives do you bring to the table that you believe you benefit the entire community?
I think a perspective I would have that no other representative who's older than me would be, I'm someone who's living the new life of a young person. We already have representatives between the age groups of 30 to 60 from different diverse backgrounds. So I'll be providing a more modern and fresh perspective and more unique ideas that can reflect our young constituents. Because in order for our community to work cohesively, we need representatives from every age group. You cannot have someone who's aged between 40, 50, 60 to represent someone at the age of 18 to 24 because they don't know the shoes that they have to fill in and that what the experiences that we're facing personally. So by me being involved in these spaces, it provides a more modern perspective, which will provide greater insight into the whole broader Fairfield community, because if you have a representative from every age group who can reflect on their youth or the older people, then that's when you're going to have a logical and a cohesive representative that can reflect on its community.
How do you plan to bridge the gap between young people within Fairfield to ensure inclusive representation?
I think standing here today, it ensures that we are bridging that gap of representation between our youth and our society. By people seeing us, young people, being involved in these spaces, it helps them realize that there are opportunities that they can be involved in. And you don't actually have to be a part of local government, state or federal as a young person to be involved in these spaces. There are opportunities. As I said, Diley has her Fowler Youth Advisory Committee. Fairfield City Council has their Fairfield Youth Advisory Committee. There are different places and institutions where you can be involved to bridge that gap. But I think young people seeing myself, Jennifer, or like Stella, for example, getting involved in these council elections, it bridges the gap itself. We have candidates who are young and who can represent our constituents. So as long as our young people see that, no, they're not put away on the side and the older people have to represent us, and that we can actually put our foot into these spaces, then that itself will be the stepping stone in bridging the gap. If more young people are elected, even better, because then we can actually work and that young person can reflect on our constituents, our younger constituents, and see what their needs are.
What are the main challenges you see facing young people in Fairfield today, and how do you plan to address them?
There are multiple issues that are affecting our youth right now. I would say education, mental health, transport, and gambling would be the four biggest issues in our community with young people. With education, for example, I went to Fairfield High School, and there wasn't that many education opportunities. The school would rank 500 out of how many high schools there are. And we didn't have that many, access to more education, so tutors and more resources. So I think that's the biggest issue we have in our community, is whether if we can implement more programs to help our youth be more, I wouldn't say be more educated, but they can have more access to study more, and they can actually achieve high results, and then we can go to university and study what we actually desire, rather than having that typical go to TAFE, study this because you're not very educated. That's like the stigma that's a part of being a local person, and we want to break those down. So that's for education. Mental health would be another. A lot of young people nowadays suffer from depression, anxiety, and something that I would say to counteract that would be being involved in more recreational activities. I'm someone that was involved in boxing for more than 5 years, and that helped with my stress and anxiety during high school. So if we can we have the facilities in Fairfield. We have tennis courts, basketball courts, soccer courts. If we can provide more access to our youth to be involved, more teams, mini Olympics, something like that. But we need to encourage more youth to go into these recreational activities to help them with their mental health. And we would have the resources on a council level if that was to occur. Another issue would be transport, but that's more of a state issue. But when you're in council, you also have the ability to apply pressure to state, as we saw with Di and Frank, where when we weren't receiving enough money for Fairfield Hospital, they advocated, they got signatures, and it forced the state government, to fund Fairfield Hospital. So if we could do the same for transport, because the only transport we have in Fairfield is Fairfield train station. And if you're someone that lives 20 minutes away, you have to drive 20 minutes to get to Fairfield station, and then from there you go to Central if you need to go to university or something. So that's another massive issue. And my last issue would say gambling. It's very dominant in Fairfield. I think Fairfield is one of the highest LGAs within gambling, and a lot of our youth are using it as a social recreation activity, which they shouldn't be. We should be having education campaigns to teach youth better ways to invest your money and ensure that you have a future in this community where it will help you in the long term, and not ruin you. As we saw in 2017, there was an article where someone at the age of 40 who lived in Fairfield, he lost over $500,000 within 40 years. So imagine what you could have done with that $500,000. You could have invested it, bought a property. So there's better use. And I think those are the four main issues that we need to focus on, especially. And if we do target these, then there's a better future for Fairfield, as we are the future.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for your time today. Your final words.
No, thank you for having me. My final words would be, when you go to that booth, make sure you vote for someone that represents you and you think is best to represent you on your issues. As we know, Fairfield has one of the highest informal voting rates, 1 out of 10, and it's not talked about a lot by politicians. Make sure that you use your vote, as that's your say. You use that vote to tell your politicians that you want these as your representatives. And just make sure that you're there and to be involved in this democratic process. It's a very beautiful process. And we'll see you there on September 14th.
بني انتخابي وبرجان المغبة هاويتم بسيمة رابل دانوخنت اديوم يوما تشارك لوخن عمان ودها بودكاست تصورة وبخيلة آلها بخازخ لوخن بخلقيات خينة مني أنا ألبرت شليمون بوشم بقلب بطاواتي